nothing but good things for the fortunate son who received this gift. It was a huge deal. Once the blessing was given, it couldn't be rescinded. No, there was no going back. Whoever got the blessing was the lucky one. The blessing was the seal on the contract between father and son. Without Isaac's blessing, the birthright claim would be useless. Now Isaac knew he was dying, so he asked to see Esau. Esau, Isaac said, get your hunting gear and go out into the wilderness and kill some animal, just like you and I used to do. Then skin it and butcher it and make one of your yummy stews so we can have one last meal together before I give you my blessing. Sure thing, Dad, says Esau, and off he goes. Well, guess who just happened to hear this conversation? Good old Mama Rebecca. Now, Rebecca is no fool. She knows that her life will be much easier if Jacob has it all. And so Rebecca becomes a woman on a mission. She meets with Jacob, and together they come up with a foolproof plan. Rebecca instructs Jacob to kill one of Isaac's sheep. She tells Jacob to bring it to her so she can prepare it. Rebecca declares that she will make one of the best stews old Isaac has ever eaten. Yum, yum. And Rebecca also instructs Jacob to dress himself in some of Esau's clothes so that Isaac, blind though he is, will recognize the scent of Esau. Then the two of them take the woolly fur from the sheep and attach it to Jacob's arms, hands, and neck. The plot thickens. And I'm sure you can figure out what happens next if you don't already know. You're right. Jacob takes the yummy stew in his hairy arms and enters Isaac's tent. The delectable stew is too much for Isaac. He falls for the deceit. Now, he may have expressed some doubts, but in the end, Isaac is convinced that Jacob is Esau, and the wonderful blessing is delivered by Isaac to Jacob. Hooray, hooray! Rebecca and Jacob have really, literally pulled the wool over old Isaac's eyes. But it's not quite time to celebrate. Esau is just getting back from his hunting trip with some of his own delicious stew. Too late. Isaac tells Esau that he's already given his blessing to him. What's with this second dish of stew, son? Suddenly, it all falls apart. Esau isn't terribly bright, but he's smart enough to figure out what has happened, so he begs his father to take back the blessing he mistakenly gave to Jacob. No can do, replied Isaac. Once a blessing has been given, that's it. It's over and done with. Good luck, Esau, Daddy Isaac says. I'm afraid you're on your own. If you were Esau, how would you feel? Well, that's how Esau felt. He had been betrayed, duped, conned, double-crossed by his brother of all people. Esau had blood in his eyes. I'm going to kill Jacob, he yells. Jacob and Rebekah heard Esau and were scared out of their wits. Jacob knew he had to run as fast as he could. Go to your Uncle Laban's and stay for a while, Rebekah told Jacob. I'll pack you some sandwiches and then you better get out of here. Along with the sandwiches, crafty Rebekah came up with a story about how she didn't want any more foreign wives hanging around the tent. She was fed up with Esau's dumb wives. And that's what she told Isaac. Rebekah pointed out that Jacob needed to visit his uncle Laban and find a suitable wife among Laban's daughters. Poor old dying Isaac bought the story, and Jacob was on his way. So off went Jacob out into the wilderness, alone, without any protection and only a few sandwiches. Pretty soon, darkness settled in, and there was no Best Western or Motel 6 in sight. No one had kept the light on for Jacob. It was pitch black out there. Wolves and other huge animals were howling. Jacob was scared to death. He had never been out in the wilderness alone before. What am I going to do? Thought Jacob. He gathered his wits about him and built a wall around himself with some stones, and then found another stone, covered it with his cloak, and used that for his pillow. Finally, frightened but exhausted, Jacob fell asleep. And that's where our scripture story begins today. Sound asleep with nothing but the sky and stars to cover him, Jacob begins to dream. Of all things, he dreams about a ladder or stairs going up to heaven. Lo and behold, there are messengers from God going up and down the stairs. It was a wild dream, and just as the dream was ending, who should show up but God? God? Can you imagine God coming to Jacob, of all people? What on earth is the world coming to? In all of our wildest dreams, would we ever think that God could show up next to that double-crossing scoundrel Jacob? What is the world coming to? And as Jacob wakes up, he realizes that God is right there next to him. The spot where Jacob laid his head is now a holy place, a place where God has come to assure Jacob that he will never be alone. God promises to always be with the lying, cheating, con artist Jacob. Wouldn't you know it? Jacob seems to be a changed man. Finally, it seems Jacob is getting the message. Now he's willing to acknowledge the presence of God in his life, and he was awestruck. Isn't that a good story? It's a great story. But what has any of this got to do with us right here, right now? Well, it might help you to know that this story was first told to the folks of Israel who had been carted off into exile in Babylon. They were grateful for the words of hope and redemption. They understood the promise God made to Jacob to always stand by him, to be with him along the way, no matter what. You see, the exiles who had lost everything and been carted off as refugees understood that in spite of everything, Jacob was himself a refugee, forced to abandon his home and family. And the exiled Israelites were comforted by the notion that God is not limited to one place in the universe. God is in all places and in all times. It was the best news these poor exiles had heard in years. God's love and grace reach out beyond our imagination. Indeed, as we think about this incredible story, we realize that God isn't acting the way we would expect God to act. There are no threats, no judgment, no punishment. It's difficult for us to understand what God is up to as far as Jacob is concerned. I think it's natural for us to wonder why God is behaving with such abundant generosity. God is giving Jacob a whole lot more than he ever expected. Jacob, the smooth, slick-talking trickster, eventually ends up as the ancestor of the Israelite people. Is this any way for God to behave? You bet it is. Just when we think we have God figured out, that we know what God will do, God turns around and does the unexpected. If God sees greatness in the ugliness of Jacob, what does God see in us? If you happen to read beyond today's story, you'll notice that Jacob bargains with God. saying, you know, God, if you really do all that you say you're going to do, that's great. And I'll tell you what, if you do it all, I'll give 10% back to you. And I'll let you be my God. But if it doesn't turn out like you promised, you'll get nothing. What I'll do is keep whatever you give me and go look for another God. So tell me, God, have you got a deal? You never gave up, did you? And the amazing and unbelievable thing is that God still loves Jacob and still sees these wonderful things for Jacob. God does do it all and a whole lot more. This incredible story tells us that God can work divine will through the most motley collection of human beings, and while we may relish for a time the triumph of deceit, we must never take our eyes off the one who is watching over all creation. Wonderful and unbelievable things happen with God. If God can use a conniver and a liar like Jacob and turn him into someone whom we know is one of the ancestors of our faith, then imagine what God can do with us if we allow God's grace to shine in our hearts. So here it is, the good news. God is with us in all times and in all places. When we stumble and fall, when we find ourselves lost in the wilderness with no place else to go and no one to rescue us, God is holding on to us. God promises to never leave our side. God will be with us to guide and sustain us. If it could happen to Jacob, it can happen to us. Our ever-living God has a talent of intruding on our lives. God comes across the divide and makes a home in our midst. God is here. He's standing with us, beside us, even when we aren't at our best. God's love surrounds us and carries us forward. One author puts it this way: when all our conniving has blown up in our faces and our luck has run out, there in the middle of nowhere is where the dream touches down, reminding us that we sleep at the gate of heaven, where it pleases God to be with us. Friends, dream on, dream on. God has wonderful plans for each one of us. May we be wise enough to learn and grow in God's love. Amen.
Amen.
Dorothy Colcott is a patient at Bucyrus Hospital, and I've been in touch with her, and she's overcoming some issues, so please keep Dorothy in your prayers this week. Are there other concerns? And let us come to God in prayer. O God of Jacob, you speak to us in the light of day and in the dark of night, when our sleeping is filled with dreams of heaven and earth. May Jacob's vision remind us to be open and watchful, ready to discover your presence in our midst. We offer our thanks to you, O God, that we can feel your spirit in this place. Truly you are among us, breathing life into our weary souls. You assure us over and over again in so many different and unexpected ways that you will never leave our sides. We can see you among the mountains and hills and the valleys and deserts. We hear you as you blow through the trees and rustle the grass. Loving God, come among us now and hear our prayers. In times of doubt and despair, touch our hearts. Hold your ever-loving arms around us. And in times of joy and celebration, laugh and dance with us. Merciful God, we are told over and over again that you will never abandon us. We hear the stories, and yet sometimes we're slow to believe and understand. Teach us to trust your grace-filled presence in our lives. Hope-filled God, in our world today, there are so many of our brothers and sisters who are living without shelter, food, and water. Many who are suffering, frightened, lost, and alone. Teach us again how to help our neighbors near and far. Empower us with the willingness to share with generous and open hearts. God, we know you are in this place offering us gifts of wisdom, peace, hope, and understanding.